You may have experienced people explaining how they design a product before, and they may have described a few core pillars of their design. These are core components or values of their product that they have in mind during its development. Game developers, for example, may describe their game as having the pillars of game mechanics, story, and immersion. Some storytellers may also have pillars in mind for their story. Each story has different kinds of pillars it might need, and a story can be well constructed if each need is addressed. For my comic, Silver Road, I consider the pillars of the story to be drama, tension, action, exploration, and downtime. My goal is for every scene in the comic to contribute to at least one of these pillars. This is based on the idea that every part of a story has a purpose. Common advice for storytellers is that every part of a story contributes to the plot, themes, or characters in some way, or else that part of the story feels pointless. The pillars of a story can define what every part of a story should contribute to. Balance between the pillars is important for a story. I find that if each pillar has a fair amount contributed to them, that story feels stronger. Each story may also have different needs. A horror story can work fine if most parts of the story contribute to tension. A slice of life works well if most parts of the story contribute to downtime. For Silver Road, I focus most on drama and exploration, but I still try to contribute a good amount to the other pillars. If a story is chapter or episode based, like my comic, each installment of the story may have different pillars that are focused on. An action-focused series could have a chapter that mainly focuses on downtime as a way to bring some variety, but the series as a whole can still put the most story elements into action. In my comic, I like to have each chapter include a different balance of pillars, but drama and exploration are still the priority. I find that a chapter that contributes a good amount to each pillar feels the most complete and well-rounded. I've named the pillars of storytelling for my comic, but what do they actually mean? Each one has different kind of scenes that may contribute to it, and different effects they have in the story. For me, drama is the most important pillar for Silver Road. This pillar relates to character arcs, themes, and how tough situations impact how the characters act. Many stories have a set of themes or character arcs at the center of their story. Every other part of the story is in service of these themes. Without drama, everything else in the story may feel like empty spectacle without meaning. Drama is what gives a story meaning, and why audiences care about what happens in it. Scenes where a character has their values changed or when they undergo growth can contribute to drama. Exploration is probably the second most important pillar for Silver Road. Exploration is about the setting, history, or rules of the story, and how the characters interact with it. In Silver Road, the relationship between the characters and the world they live in is very important, so exploration is an important pillar for that story. That's why the characters explore so many different locations and interact with the spirits that embody what people find special about those places. The exploration pillar isn't important for a lot of stories, but it is important to fiction genres such as fantasy or sci-fi. Those kinds of genres are all about exploring strange environments or rules, whether it be magic or science. Scenes where characters learn about the world, navigate it, or even just exist in an interesting setting can contribute to exploration. Action is the kind of pillar that, while it's not super important for the themes of a story, can often be crucial for the plot or pacing of a story. Action consists of things such as fighting or chases. Action is a part of a story where the characters have to think fast and act. Many stories are built around action sequences. They're a solid way to create stakes, keep audiences engaged, and they're often the most memorable scenes of a story. Stories can still have stakes without action. Stakes can be based on tension or drama, but stakes in action are often most straightforward. Some stories work best without any action, but action does a lot to make it feel like something happens in a story. Without action, a story can feel directionless if the other pillars aren't handled well. Action can often illustrate deeper parts of the story, like how a character acts in peril or how they interact with their environment in a pinch. A physical conflict a character has may reflect a mental conflict they need to overcome. I include some action in my story because it's an urban fantasy adventure. It makes sense for them to fight monsters, and it gives them some concrete obstacles to solve on top of their mental ones. Often, in the process of solving a physical obstacle, a character may grow on the inside as well. Tension can be unpleasant, intriguing, or both. Tension is related to horror, suspense, and mystery. Not every story needs this pillar, but it can add some spice. Mystery scenes can also contribute to exploration, but in the case of Silver Road, the unanswered questions are often related to the spookier parts of the story. Tension can give an audience a cathartic sense of fear or unknowing. These are the parts of the story that feel unnatural or unsettling. Similar to action, this pillar is related to the sense of peril, but tension involves characters solving their problems with hiding or surviving more than fighting. These are problems that the characters don't know how to solve. There's a lot of overlap with action, but tension is more about tone than problems. I like to include a small but impactful bit of tension into Silver Road because I find that sort of tone interesting to include in a story. Horror is also often a good way to illustrate a theme or moral problem by turning it into a supernatural obstacle. Scenes that add tension could involve hiding from a monster or uncovering secrets of a conspiracy. Downtime is a pillar that I feel is often underappreciated in adventure stories. This pillar can involve humor, romance, but also any sort of mundane or comfortable activities for the characters. This pillar provides levity to an otherwise potentially stressful story. Other pillars can make an audience feel engaged or immersed in a story, but downtime can make a story feel like home, or the characters feel like friends. It's a way to make an audience feel welcome to the story. Humor and romance are in many stories, even in more action-oriented ones. In Silver Road, I tried to include a few mundane low-stakes scenes. Scenes like this could be considered filler content, especially if overused or poorly paced. But I think a controlled amount of them really helps a story. They're a chance to show what the characters are like in their daily lives. Downtime is also great for contrast. If a story only has high-stakes scenes, then those scenes can feel tedious. Downtime provides the audience a chance to rest. Juxtaposing downtime and tension can really increase the impact of a story. One of my favorite examples of this kind of juxtaposition is in the game of Mori, which juxtaposes the cute, wholesome moments with psychological horror to increase the impact of both. The way the game shows both traumatizing events and cozy, mundane moments makes the emotional impact of the story really strong. Downtime is often overlooked, but effective use can often separate good stories and great ones. Each story may have its own pillars, and each of its pillars may be balanced in different ways. A story may include several pillars, but only a couple are considered to be really important, while the others are just need to have enough scenes to keep the story functioning. Consider what a story needs. Too much or too little contributions to a pillar can make the story feel off balance, but the genre of the story can determine what pillars can handle more or less scenes without ruining the story. As stated before, too little drama can make a story feel meaningless. I think that drama is important for most stories, but comedy stories can work fine without much drama. A lack of exploration in the story means that the setting or its relations to characters isn't important. That works fine for a lot of stories, but a lack of meaning in the setting can be problematic for others. Action isn't necessary for a lot of stories, especially ones that focus on more mundane problems. Sometimes stories without action can feel uneventful, so the other pillars should be well developed to make that not a problem. A lot of stories work fine without tension, but the lack of tension in some stories could feel uninteresting. Too little downtime in a story can make the story feel too exhausting to follow along with, and can make the characters feel less likable. Too much balance into one pillar can also cause problems depending on the genre. Too much drama could start to feel melodramatic, if every obstacle in the story becomes the greatest moral dilemma the characters have ever faced. Too much exploration can feel lore dumpy, or more like an encyclopedia for a cool fictional world rather than an actual story. Too much action can feel substanceless, especially if the action scenes are only happening for the action's sake. Too much tension could be too unpleasant for many audiences, which is fine for horror genres, but it's best moderated in other stories. Too much downtime can make a story start to feel like filler. This is fine for stories where the goal is to see characters interact in interesting ways, but if a plot is interrupted by downtime too often, there could be problems with interest from the audience. Balance is the key when handling the pillars of a story. The balance required depends on the genre of a story. Storytellers should be aware of what their story needs in order to balance the pillars well. For Silver Road, I want it to be an urban fantasy adventure where the characters undergo arcs over the course of the story, so drama and exploration are important. I use action to put events into the story and to help develop the characters and how they handle peril. I use tension to create some intriguing mysteries and moods, and I use downtime to improve investment in the characters. If you're making a story, what pillars would be important to it and why? The pillars of storytelling are something to keep in mind when creating a story. If you're creating a story, how much do the scenes contribute to each pillar? I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Goodbye, everybody. Sam wishes you well.